Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we discuss my thoughts on episode 17 of the anime series Sakurada Reset. And damn, this show doesn't get that much more intriguing and compelling every single episode. It's got me by the lapels, glued to the screen. Is it keeping me? And it's just like, wow, man, I don't know how this is going to play out, but every revelation is like bombastic. It's like mind-blowing. And particularly in this episode, where we're finally calling back on the three architects of the original Sakurada, which has propelled the existence of Sakurada in the modern sense. It's the Sakurada we now know, the living, breathing Sakurada in the modern sense in the series. These are the three who birthed this. You know, they gave birth to this idea. And some part of it was sacrificial. In the case of the witch, we see she was very much an integral factor in that trio. But the other two members, Keeley, were the parents of Arachi Masamune, the smiling, very nefarious-seeming bureau guy. This is the first time we actually finally have his name. He is the guy who put forth this idea in the previous episode that his long-term goal is to erase these abilities from Sakurada, from not only Sakurada, he speaks about in dialogue in this episode, from the world at large as well. And it's not so much a wiping out of the ability per se, but a wiping out of the memories of how to utilize the ability, how to summon them forth, so as to put the cap on the bottle, so that they won't be tapped into any longer within Sakurada and without, you know, the grander world, as I say, by his own design. And so the sort of overhanging question left is, well, how much of what's going on with the spontaneous uses of these abilities, the laughing and the car accident, the incident, as it was said to be, told to Kay by the cat who always disguises his voice on the phone, you know, are these part and parcel with his trying to manipulate the scenario to bring about that so-called self-imposed order, or not? Is it something Sumire is having a hand in? And I found it very much intriguing that as far as answering my speculations about there being two Sumires, in a sense, I was right on the money. In a sense, I was completely way off. There are two Sumires, kind of. Because as we find through the course of this episode, as Kay is talking to that person who disguises his voice, they piece together the fact that when she died 2 years ago, before she died, she had, you know, implanted these messages in his buddy who could relay them via telepathic wave, you know, into the mind. And then, you know, she went to this cat who could disguise his voice to have him clamp down, wipe away the memory in Kay's buddy who could do that. So he wouldn't know when he called him in the last episode and said, I just got a message from Sumire. Did that come from you? Where'd that come from? And he denied it. It's because he literally didn't remember it. He's passing these messages on and then forgetting about them as though he had never done that himself. So it's really these messages from Sumire arriving within Kay's mind. These are 2 years old. She was already in the planning stages, and it's easy to forget. Like, you know, you think, well, how did that happen? But she had that future sensation ability. She could predict, you know, the future. She had that precognitive ability to know what exactly her manipulations would amount to 2 years previous. And the idea that Kay is so upset about her having died, I guess it's very literal that she did actually die. The reasoning behind that seems to be because of her interest in him and the course of manipulating him. And so, obviously, he's very much enraged by that. You know, having been manipulated to this nth degree by somebody beyond the grave, in a sense, but they're still living and breathing in the world at the same time because, of course, that whole transaction of getting the younger Sumire out of, you know, a photo and everything like that. So there is still a Sumire out there. She's the photo Sumire, as I called her in my previous episode discussion video. She is the modern Sumire, but the Sumire of old. The former version is still sort of out there being a puppet master to all of this stuff. And so I have to call back in the last episode when the modern photo Sumire was lamenting how strenuous this scenario was for her as it relates to Kay, but she pointedly said, you know, you're okay, you're happy. She was probably talking about her former self, the Sumire that actually, you know, killed herself those 2 years ago. and had put all of this into the works. She's suffering because of her former self. So there was some truth to that. But I think you could also add a parallel to that in the way this Adachi guy is manipulating things. And as we find toward the end of the episode, when Sumire is talking to his woman, his female compatriot, who can sense lies and all that stuff, do we find the photo Sumire, she no longer possesses the ability to sense the future. And it's as an extension of having been locked down by Adachi. So you could almost then make that parallel, as I say, that when she's saying she's suffering for someone, perhaps it's that partnership, that penultimate partnership with Adachi, the cat from the bureau, that she's been sidled up with because of her former self, the Sumire that died. Now, adding sort of insult to injury, do we find that this trio from the bureau, in the modern sense, they'd gone into Honoka's mind and locked her down, locked Mishuru, locked Chiruchiru, and he only barely just made a sort of spin-off version of himself, not a version that held those godlike powers within the dream world, but enough of a sort of cognizance, a consciousness that Kei can go in and talk to and find out about all of this. The purpose was strictly seeking Sumire. And they locked the dream world Sumire down because I guess they had a perception of her going back and forth in and out of there, and sort of pulling the strings to a degree. The photo Sumire, in any case, as outlined by her former self, she would go in, and all those conversations we saw her having with Chiruchiro and everything that apparently went back a ways, this was a way that she was able to continue the manipulations for her former self. She's acting on the guidance of her former self, much as Kei is, with all these messages he's getting. Be in that store where that, laughing, that sudden compulsive laughing manifests itself. Be at the car accident that's actually an incident, and all this kind of stuff. He's being led to these points in the hopes that he will garner enough of this information, because of his memory retainability, his ability. He'll gain all of this information and piece together exactly where this is all aligning, who is at fault, what they're going to try to do. And I don't know what he's going to do with that information. I'm half expecting him to completely throw a wrench in the works of Sumire's original outline, whatever that is, whatever that end game is, and completely defy her expectations. And possibly that could mean working alongside Adachi. We're still being given this sense that Adachi is somehow ominous, that what he wants is wrong, that he is somehow a villain, an antagonist. And again, as I discussed at length in my previous episode discussion video, I have to beg the question, is that actually the case? Is it not perchance that he's trying to better the lives of all the people who have these abilities? Maybe they are, some of them in any case, are suffering for it, and it's making that much more unnecessary complexities added to just a daily lifestyle, daily living. But then, as I say, you also have to weigh the other end of that whole argument, the other side of the coin, where so many people's lives are actually being enhanced. They are being given, the ability to live more vivaciously, more satisfyingly, and all these things. They're being given lives where perchance they might have lost them. If you look at, the old Catman that Nono had known, as well as Honoka herself, she created the dream world so she could actually live where she was forced out of any sort of lifestyle because of the ailments that made her body so frail and weak, and the illnesses that had impacted her. So she had a free-roaming, spectacular life within the dream world. But that would be something that would have to be sacrificed if the abilities were made to be forgotten. So there's good and bad to both sides of the aisle. And I just wonder, I don't expect, even though the modern Sumire, the photograph Sumire, is working seemingly alongside the Bureau, this Adachi character, I don't believe, because she's acting on the precognizance of her former self and the manipulations of her former self, I don't believe she's actually working with them. I believe she's just utilizing that temporarily to her own accord, to her own advancement, or at least as she ends this episode getting out of the car after talking to the woman from the Bureau, the fact that she no longer has her precognizant ability To her, that signals, okay, well, I've been successful at whatever my part, whatever my role in this grand design was, working off the manipulations and the pre-planning that went into all of this from Samir before she killed herself 2 years ago. So that makes me lean more toward the idea that these are two opposing forces. Adachi from the Bureau and the original Samir, they were working against each other, where we saw it, which it's mind-blowing that much more because if we go back to the three architects, the original witch who had that precognitive ability and Adachi's parents, in a sense they were trying to bring this about, but I don't know whether they were leaning more toward what Adachi wants in the quelling of all of these abilities by the end, you know, in the least impactful, in a negative sense way, as the witch puts it, or if they were bringing about the grand design of a Samir, a next generation witch who could then work beyond what the original witch set out to do in the hopes of making these abilities, which are seemingly a natural sort of compunction of humanity, of evolution, make it more acceptable worldwide, free up that retention that is surrounding Sakurada, keeping the abilities in the awareness and in the minds of those people alone, whereas the rest of the world has forgotten it. Maybe they're trying to break that barrier in the long term to make those abilities become aware to the world. And where does Kay align? You know, I feel like he's more likely now to probably align toward what Adachi is trying to accomplish. Now understanding what these, you know, all of a sudden manifestations of the laughing in the store and the car incident and all these kinds of things, he's suddenly able to now weigh for himself the way the Bureau is going to react to that. Well, of course, they're going to be concerned of, you know, sort of the mouse getting out of the box. And what will they naturally do? They will naturally try to maybe suppress it, clamp it down, treat it very worrisome. And my question again is this something of Adachi's own doing? Did he somehow bring this about? Is he somehow manipulating things to give off this warning sign to the Bureau, to force the Bureau's hand to clamp down, which is what he wants? Or is it actually just something that is happening naturally, you know, and it's just working coincidentally toward what he wants? I think it's more likely he probably has a hand in it, considering all of the suppression he's been, you know, at doing, between trying to fish the photograph Samir out, which he has successfully done, trying to lock the dream world down, which he has successfully done, and all these other, you know, things. Every time they find out that one of these sudden manifestations has occurred, you see him in the back of the car smiling. He's very pleased with himself. So it seems as though even if he's not directly tied to causing these sudden manifestations of abilities, these uncontrolled ones, it's at least aligned to what he wants, what his end game penultimately is. And so, again, just to sort of reiterate that overhanging question, well, where does Samir's, and then we're going back to the 2 years old, having died Samir, where does her allegiance lie? Is she trying to work against, in, you know, an antithetical degree against Adachi and the Bureau? Does she want to actually create a groundswell of breaking that barrier and freeing the abilities the world over, bringing it to the awareness of the world over? That seems to be the only natural answer if we overlook completely her selfish desire that she has for Kay himself. I don't know. I don't know what her motivations really truly are, and I don't know where Kay is going to align by the end. Again, because of how upset he has been made because of her manipulations, I could see him very rightfully going and siding with Adachi and saying, you know, these abilities are the bane of our existence. We need to be rid of them. We need to put the cap on the bottle. But at the same time, you know, it's still a level of, you have that discussion between him and Haruki when he goes to Haruki's house as ordered by Samir to bring a book over, put a cover on it and all this stuff, all this elaborate, you know, necessity to conduct this. And there is Haruki trying to compel him to back down off of this, to calm down, to relax and rest and not be so, you know, kerfuffled by all of this, not to lose himself to the frustration of all of this. And so again, it's like, is Samir trying to align Kei and Haruki, or is there some other selfish machination behind it? It seems to be pushing them closer together, but he says in that moment, before parting with Haruki, he just wants the happiest outcome. And a lot of that revolves around sort of dancing around what Samir has put into action. So I don't know which way he's going to go. I don't know which way Samir is going to go and which way he's going to go. It seems by the end of this episode that if we're to take, photograph Samir's dialogue literally, seriously, that she's been removed from the equation all told. She played her part, and now the rest of this grand design is befalling back to the original Samir, what she had set into motion. Again, those messages that Kei is getting are 2 years old, and his buddy who is sending them was made to forget them. How many more of these messages are there? Bearing in mind that Samir had that precognitive ability to sense what the future would be through the memories of Kei, through the memories of others. And is she working against Adachi, trying to free those abilities to the world? And will Kei work alongside her, or will he side with Adachi, who's trying to contain them and erase them? I don't know. And it's going to be really intriguing to see how the next 2 parts of this particular arc play out. Love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of this particular episode of Sakurada Reset, as well if you followed along with it as closely as I did, because I thought it was all really impactful and intriguing and engaging, and if this video helped you make sense of any of it, if you had trouble with it while watching the episode. So yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.